The rhythmic hum of tires against asphalt had become my constant companion over the past 4 hours. The leather-wrapped steering wheel felt smooth beneath my palms as I navigated the winding mountain road, my mind preoccupied with the upcoming merger that could finally cement my position as the youngest partner in our firm's history. The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, but I barely noticed its beauty, too engrossed in mental calculations and rehearsing my presentation for tomorrow's meeting. My phone buzzed for the third time in the past hour. Probably Amira, my wife, wondering why I hadn't called to say goodnight to the children again. A familiar pang of guilt twisted in my stomach, but I pushed it aside. She would understand eventually, I told myself. Once the deal was closed, once we could afford that bigger house in the better school district, once I could provide the life I'd always promised her. The end justified the means. At least, that's what I'd been telling myself for the past 5 years. The dashboard clock read 7:42 p.m. when everything changed. A deer emerged from the dense forest flanking the road, its eyes reflecting my headlights like twin moons in the growing darkness. I jerked the wheel instinctively, too sharply. Time seemed to slow as I felt the car's traction break free, the world outside the windows beginning to spin in a dizzying blur of trees and sky. The first impact came from the right as the car slammed into the guardrail, the metal screaming in protest. The airbag exploded in my face with the force of a heavyweight's punch, but I remained conscious enough to feel the second impact as we rolled down the embankment. Glass shattered, metal crumpled, and somewhere in the chaos, I had the absurd thought that I would miss tomorrow's meeting. Then came the stillness. The car had come to rest on its roof, and I hung suspended by my seatbelt, watching drops of my own blood fall upward toward the ceiling. The pain hadn't registered yet, but I knew something was terribly wrong. My breath came in short, ragged gasps, and the edges of my vision began to blur and darken. That's when I first noticed the strange quality of the light around me. It seemed to pulse and shift, as if the air itself had become liquid. I felt a curious sensation of lightness, of disconnection, and suddenly I was looking down at myself from above the wreckage. The sight was surreal. My body remained trapped in the mangled vehicle, but I felt no attachment to it, no pain, no fear. I watched as the first responders arrived, their emergency lights casting rotating patterns of red and blue across the trees. They worked with practiced efficiency, cutting through the metal of my car with hydraulic tools that screamed like angry beasts. I tried to tell them I was fine, that I was right here, but my voice made no sound in this strange state of being. The paramedics pulled my body free and began their work. "No pulse," one shouted, beginning chest compressions while another prepared a defibrillator. I wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it all. How could I have no pulse when I was clearly here, watching everything? But the laughter died in my non-existent throat as I began to understand the gravity of my situation. A profound peace washed over me, unlike anything I'd ever experienced. The constant anxiety that had been my companion for years, about money, status, success, melted away like morning frost in the sun. In its place came a clarity that was almost painful in its intensity. I saw my life as if through new eyes. The missed family dinners, the forgotten anniversaries, the promises broken in pursuit of what I had convinced myself was more important. The paramedics continued their efforts below, but their voices grew distant, as if reaching me through water. A soft light began to fill my field of vision, different from the harsh emergency lights below. It carried warmth and something else, a presence that I felt more than saw. "Kareem," a voice called, and though it wasn't loud, it seemed to resonate through every particle of my being. I turned, or rather, my consciousness shifted, and beheld a figure that defied description. It radiated serenity and wisdom, and though I couldn't make out distinct features, I felt I knew this presence intimately, as if meeting a beloved friend after a long separation. The figure approached, and the world around us seemed to fade into insignificance. The emergency lights, the sounds of the paramedics, the twisted wreckage of my car, all became distant, like a half-remembered dream. The presence extended what I perceived as a hand, though it was more like a concentration of light and energy. "There is much you need to see," the figure said, its voice carrying the weight of centuries yet remaining gentle, compassionate. "Allah has granted you this moment for a purpose. Will you come with me?" I hesitated, looking back at my body below. The paramedics had loaded it onto a stretcher and were rushing it toward the waiting ambulance. Part of me wanted to return, to go back to the life I knew, despite its flaws and complications. But a stronger part, a part one hadn't even known existed until this moment, yearned to understand what this being had to show me. The figure waited patiently, radiating an understanding that transcended mortal compassion. In that moment, I realized that this wasn't just a near-death experience. It was an opportunity for transformation, a chance to see beyond the narrow confines of the life I had built for myself. With what felt like my first truly free choice in years, I reached out and accepted the figure's offered hand. As our essences connected, the world around us dissolved into pure light, and I felt myself being drawn into a journey that would reshape everything I thought I knew about faith, purpose, and the true meaning of success. The last thing I heard before we departed was the wail of the ambulance siren, growing fainter and fainter until it was swallowed by the encompassing light. My old life, with all its certainties and ambitions, fell away like autumn leaves in a winter wind, making way for what was to come. The light surrounding us coalesced into a space that existed beyond physical dimensions. My guide's presence remained steady, anchoring me in this ethereal realm where thoughts seemed to have substance and emotions painted the air with subtle hues. The figure's radiance had softened to a gentle glow that reminded me of dawn prayers at my grandfather's house when I was a child, a memory I hadn't revisited in decades. "Your heart is troubled, Kareem," the figure spoke, and the words resonated not just in what passed from my ears in this state, but through the very essence of my being. "You have traveled far from your path, though you believed you were moving forward." Before I could protest, the space around us shifted, and we stood in my office, or rather, we witnessed a scene from 6 months ago. I watched myself hunched over my desk, phone pressed to my ear, speaking in harsh whispers. "I don't care what you have to do, Ahmed. Get those numbers up before the board meeting, or we'll both be looking for new jobs." The memory made me wince. I had pressured my junior analyst to modify some projections, knowing he needed the job to support his sick mother. "This is not who I began, but the figure raised a hand, and the scene changed again. Now we stood in my daughter Layla's bedroom. She sat at her small desk, carefully creating a world's best dad card for my birthday. The calendar on her wall showed it was 3 weeks ago. I watched my past self open the door, glance at her, and speak without fully entering the room. "Sorry, sweetheart, Baba has an important dinner tonight. We'll celebrate this weekend, okay?" The scene froze on Layla's face, the practiced smile that didn't quite hide her disappointment, the way her small show. Shoulders slumped as she slowly put down her markers. I had forgotten about the card entirely. Had she ever given it to me? The thought sent a wave of shame through my ethereal form. "Your daughter prayed for you every night," my guide said softly. "Not for toys or treats or the new bike her friends had. She prayed for time, just a few minutes of your undivided attention." The visions continued, each one more revealing than the last. I saw myself declining invitations to family gatherings, skipping the weekly prayers at the mosque, brushing aside old friends who didn't fit into my new corporate lifestyle. Each scene was a small betrayal of the values I had once held dear, justified by the relentless pursuit of success. "These are not accusations," my guide said, noting my growing distress. "They are reflections, mirrors showing not just what you did, but who you became in the process." We paused at a particular memory that made my soul ache. My father's last Ramadan. He had asked me to break fast with the family just once during the holy month. I had promised to try, knowing even as the words left my mouth that I wouldn't make it. He passed away 2 months later, and I had been too busy closing a deal to spend more than a day at his funeral. "You measure wealth in figures on a screen," the figure continued, its voice carrying no judgment, only deep compassion. "But the true measure of a life is written in the hearts of others." Let me show you the wealth you have squandered. The space around us transformed again, but this time instead of specific memories, I saw countless moments of misconnections and abandoned responsibilities flowing past like leaves in a river. Each one represented a chance to strengthen the bonds of family, to serve my community, to honor the teachings that had once formed the foundation of my life. Your prayer rug gathered dust while your wallet grew fat, my guide observed. Tell me, Kareem, in all your calculations and projections, did you ever measure the cost of a forgotten smile? Did you calculate the compound interest of neglected love? The question struck me with physical force. I had always prided myself on being practical, on making decisions based on clear metrics and definable outcomes. But here, in this space beyond physical reality, those metrics seemed hollow, like trying to measure the ocean with a teaspoon. We moved through more scenes, charity events I had dismissed as wastes of time, community projects I had been too busy to support, moments of spiritual reflection sacrificed on the altar of productivity. Each one added to the weight in my soul. Yet somehow the burden felt cleansing, like the pressure that transforms coal into diamonds. Your talents were given to you as an amana, a trust, the figure said, using the Arabic word that carried deeper meaning than any English translation could convey. Every skill, every opportunity, every moment of success was a test. Did you see them as blessings to be shared or treasures to be hoarded? The question hung in the ethereal air as we witnessed scene after scene of my interactions with colleagues and competitors. I saw myself driving hard bargains that bordered on exploitation, justifying them as just business. I watched as I gradually replaced the ethics I had learned at my father's knee with the cold calculations of profit and loss. But I struggled to find words that wouldn't sound like excuses. I provided for my family. They have everything they need. Do they? The figure's question was gentle but piercing. The space around us shifted once more, and I saw my home as it existed in that moment. Amira sat alone in our expensively furnished living room, her prayer beads moving slowly through her fingers as she supplicated for my safety. Layla and her younger brother Yusuf were already asleep, their rooms filled with toys that couldn't replace their father's presence. You built them a house, my guide acknowledged. Ed, but did you help them build a home? You filled their rooms with possessions, but did you fill their days with presents? You gave them everything money could buy, but did you give them what only a father can provide? Each question was like a key unlocking chambers in my heart that I had sealed shut years ago. I saw now how I had confused provision with presence, success with significance. The realization brought with it a pain more acute than anything I had felt in the car crash. Your prayer that your children would have a better life than yours, it was sincere, the figure continued. But somewhere along the way, you forgot what made your own childhood rich. It wasn't the size of your father's house or the car he drove. It was the way he listened to your dreams, the stories he shared after Maghrib prayer, the strength of his faith that shaped your earliest understanding of the world. The truth of these words resonated through my being. I remembered sitting on my father's lap as he read from the Quran, not understanding all the words, but feeling the depth of his conviction. I remembered the pride in his eyes when I completed my first fast, how he taught me that true strength lay not in dominating others, but in mastering myself. You have not lost your way entirely, my guide said, and for the first time I detected a note of hope in its voice. The seeds of faith and compassion still lie dormant in your heart, waiting for the rain of guidance to help them grow again. But you must choose to nurture them. The figure extended its hand again, and I sensed we were about to move on to something even more profound. Are you ready to see what lies beneath the surface of the life you've built? Are you prepared to confront the true state of your soul? I hesitated, knowing that what was to come would likely be even more challenging than what I had already seen. But I also felt a growing determination to face whatever truths awaited me. I had spent years avoiding difficult questions about the state of my spiritual life. Perhaps it was time to finally answer them. Yes, I said, and was surprised by the strength in my voice. Show me what I need to see. As we prepared to move on, I caught one last glimpse of my family's home. In Layla's room, the unfinished birthday card still lay on her desk, waiting for a father who had forgotten how to prioritize what truly mattered. I silently vowed that if I was given another chance, things would be different. The scene began to fade, dissolving into a new landscape that would reveal even deeper truths about the poverty of my soul. But even as we transitioned, I felt something stirring within me, not just regret for what had been lost, but hope for what might yet be reclaimed. The desolate landscape that materialized before us bore no resemblance to any earthly terrain. Barren rocks stretched to a horizon that seemed to bend inward upon itself, and the sky above held neither sun nor stars, yet a diffuse light permeated everything. This was not a physical place, I realized, but a manifestation of something far more personal. This, my guide said softly, is the terrain of your soul. The words struck me with devastating clarity. Each craggy outcropping represented an abandoned principle, every shadowed valley a neglected relationship. The barrenness reflected the spiritual drought I had imposed upon myself, too busy chasing wealth to notice the increasing aridity of my inner life. A mirror appeared before us, but instead of my physical reflection, it showed something far more revealing. I saw myself as I truly was, a hollow figure draped in expensive clothes, carrying a briefcase filled with worthless papers. The image's eyes were empty, focused on distant horizons while blind to the treasures that lay at its feet. Your prayer mat gathers dust, my guide observed, while your credit cards show wear. Your Quran sits unopened while your portfolio grows thick. Tell me, Kareem, W.H., when was the last time you felt the peace of true submission? The question pierced me like an arrow. I couldn't remember. Somewhere between the quarterly reports and board meetings, between the networking events and investment strategies, I had lost touch with the rhythms that had once anchored my life. The 5 daily prayers, once as natural as breathing, had become inconvenient interruptions to be postponed and eventually forgotten. We moved through this spiritual wasteland, and I began to notice small, withered plants struggling to survive in the harsh terrain. My guide knelt beside one, touching it gently. Your kindness to the elderly neighbor last winter, it explained. A moment of genuine compassion in a desert of self-interest. Another struggling plant. The time you anonymously paid for a stranger's medical bills. These rare instances of goodness only highlighted the barrenness of the surrounding landscape. But it's not too late, my guide said, standing. Even the driest earth can bloom again with proper care. Look, the scene shifted, and I saw a vision of what could be. The same landscape, but transformed. Gardens of compassion bloomed where there had been only rocks. Springs of wisdom flowed through valleys once parched by materialism. The air itself seemed to pulse with the rhythm of divine remembrance. This is your potential, my guide explained. The soul you could nurture if you choose to redirect your energy from accumulation to elevation. We moved forward in time, witnessing possible futures branching out before us. I saw myself leading prayer at the local mosque, my children beside me, their faces glowing with the same spiritual light I remembered from my own childhood. I watched as I used my business acumen not just to generate profits, but to create opportunities for those in need. The vision expanded to show the ripple effects of this transformed life. The community center I would help build became a sanctuary for troubled youth, preventing countless tragedies before they could occur. The microloan program I would establish helped single mothers start businesses, breaking cycles of poverty that had persisted for generations. Your skills in finance and organization were never meant to be abandoned. My guide clarified, but redirected. Success in this world and the next are not mutually exclusive when pursued with wisdom and balance. The scene shifted again, and we stood in a marble-floored hospital corridor. Through the windows of a private room, I saw myself lying unconscious, surrounded by medical equipment. Amira sat beside the bed, her prayer beads moving steadily through her fingers. Layla and Yusuf had fallen asleep in chairs nearby, their small faces troubled even in sleep. They pray for your return, my guide said. But which version of you will go back to them? The one who measures life in decimal points, or the one who recognizes that his true wealth lies in the hearts around him? Before I could answer, we were moving again, but but this time toward a light so brilliant it would have been blinding in physical form. In this state, however, I could perceive its beauty without pain. Within its radiance, I began to understand truths that transcended language. I saw how every moment of my life had been a gift, an opportunity to grow closer to the divine through service to creation. I understood that true success wasn't measured by the size of one's bank account, but by the depth of one's impact on others' lives. The pursuit of wealth wasn't inherently wrong, but allowing it to eclipse all other forms of growth and connection was a profound form of poverty. "The choice is yours," my guide said, as the light began to intensify. "You can return to your old patterns, or you can embrace the understanding you've gained here. But know this, knowledge brings responsibility. You can no longer claim ignorance of what truly matters." The light grew stronger, and I felt a pulling sensation, as if my consciousness was being drawn back toward my physical form. My guide's presence began to fade, but its final words reached me with perfect clarity. "Remember, Kareem, every breath is a second chance. Use them wisely." The transition back to my body felt like diving into cold water. Awareness returned in waves. First the antiseptic smell of the hospital, then the rhythmic beeping of monitors, and finally the warm pressure of Amira's hand holding mine. I opened my eyes to find my family's faces transitioning from worry to relief, but I knew the greater journey was just beginning. In the days and weeks that followed, many questioned the changes in me. Some business associates thought I'd lost my edge when I insisted on more ethical business practices. Some religious leaders were skeptical when I spoke of my experience, warning against innovations in faith. But I had touched a truth too profound to ignore, seen a reality too clear to deny. I began small, reinstating daily prayers, making time for family meals, listening more than speaking. The community center started as a modest operation in a rented storefront, offering after-school programs and job training. Over time, it grew into something larger than I could have imagined, not because of my business acumen, but because of the sincere intentions of everyone involved. Today, years later, I still catch glimpses of that spiritual landscape I was shown, but it's no longer barren. With each act of kindness, each moment of remembrance, each choice to prioritize connection over acquisition, new life takes root. The gardens grow slowly, but they grow. Sometimes in the quiet moments before dawn prayer, I think about that desperate night on the mountain road. What seemed like the end of everything was actually a beginning. The accident that could have destroyed my life instead saved it, teaching me that sometimes we must lose our way completely before we can find our true path. I've learned that real wealth isn't what you can hold in your hands, but what you hold in your heart. Success isn't about reaching a destination, but about how many others you help along the way. And faith, true faith, isn't just about ritual observance, but about allowing divine guidance to transform every aspect of your life. The figure for my vision was right. Every breath is indeed a second chance. Each morning when I wake, I try to remember this truth, grateful for another day to serve, to grow, to love, and to slowly transform that once barren spiritual landscape into a garden worthy of its creator. As I watch my children growing, now comfortable in both their faith and their place in the modern world, I understand that this is the real legacy I was meant to build. Not an empire of wealth, but a heritage of wisdom. Not a monument to success, but a testimony to transformation. And sometimes, in those liminal moments between consciousness and sleep, I swear I can still feel the presence of my guide, watching with approval as I continue the journey that began on that fateful night, one conscious breath at a time.